All righty. Well, we're going to do Isaiah 34 tonight. Next week, we're going to do Isaiah 35. And then the next week, we're going to go to the book of Matthew and take an Isaiah break. All right? I've heard all the judgment I can take for a little while. I need a judgment break. So I think these people right here were saying they need a judgment break too, but they didn't get one, right? All right, Isaiah 34. Now, as we start this, we've been in this judgment phase for quite a while now, almost since the beginning of the book of Isaiah. And, sorry, the reason for all this judgment is that these people are just godless, I guess. You know, they keep rejecting God. You know, and we've read all this stuff in here. We've been through 6 different woes that we've seen and heard of and seen take place. You know, Isaiah even reaches out as he's talking about all this stuff that's going on, this thing's going to happen, and then he goes on a little further and he takes it into the future. You know, the things that are still coming. He takes them right on into the great tribulation time. You know, when they're waiting on the coming of the king, that's what they're waiting on. These people in this time of day were waiting on a king. But, you know, today we're not waiting on a king, y'all. It ain't a king we're looking for. It's a Savior. You know, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that blessed hope that we have in Jesus Christ, you know, when he comes back, you know. And when he comes back, he's going to take the church out of this world, you know. So the church is leaving the world when Jesus comes back. And then those who left will have to go through and do all the great tribulation time. And, you know, the great tribulation time is just going to go from bad to worse. Then it's going to go from tribulation after tribulation. It's going to go right into the war of Armageddon. I got to ask y'all a question. Can y'all hear this ringing? Or is that just me? Because sometimes it's just me. Thank you very much. I feel a lot better about myself now. So, a lot of times they call that tendonitis. I call it a bad childhood is what I call it. So, you know, so this Armageddon, so all this prophecy that we're reading about and all this prophecy that we're hearing about, it really contradicts man's viewpoint on the world. See, man figures that he'll build his own utopia. You know, that's the thing. None of us want to look at the bad things. Even when the bad things are guaranteed to be coming, we don't want to buy into it. So we're thinking that there'll be a man-made utopia, you know, that man will bring these things, you know, and that man believing in this kind of stuff, that things are going to get better. It's just what we're doing is we're believing like in this philosophy. We're believing like the philosophy of evolution. You know, the philosophy of evolution tells you that things just constantly improve. They never get better. They constantly improve. You know, and I think that we buy into that. But what we don't realize, and a lot of people don't realize, evolution is not a science. And people think that it is a science because they used to teach evolution in science class, you know. But it is not a science. It's just a philosophy of man, and it cannot be proven in any way, shape, or form, you know. That, you know, things just don't get better with time. It don't always happen that way, okay? And that's what I think these people are looking for. And I see this world, this universe, you know, it does get better. But it's not due to anything that man did for it to get better. It's all going to come after God gets through with the stuff that he's got going on. If it's about man, then it's got its own judgment coming, because when man does something and, you know, and he's trying to do it for man and by man and just with man, there's going to be a judgment that's going to be paid for it. You know, man's work generally contradicts God's work. You know, and it's going to really, if man's trying to do something to get to final judgment, and it's really going to contradict the final judgment that God's got coming for us. So, you know, the best thing that we could do, and the best thing these people could have ever done, was just go ahead and listen to the Lord to start with. You know, and the judgment's going to end finally at the Battle of Armageddon, okay? Now, it's all coming to a head when the Antichrist tries to rule, because the Antichrist is coming, and when he tries to rule everything and tries to put his spin on everything in the world, evidently that's at the point when Jesus is going to say, I've had enough. And, and enough is enough, and all this other stuff will place me in. It's all ended, with the coming of Christ to the earth. When he comes to Christ, when Christ comes to earth, he's going to establish the new kingdom. And then it'll all be different one more time, but it'll all be better for the last time, okay? So, let's look at verse number 1. Come near, you nations, to hear, and heed, you people. Let the earth hear and all that is in it, the world and all things that come forth from it. So, these words, in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 2, God called heaven and earth to witness his judgment upon his people, Israel, okay? Now, here God calls only the nations of the earth to witness his final judgment on the nations. And these nations that he's really calling forth in this is all of these rebellious nations. These are all these nations that keep rejecting God. And so that's where he's really focusing, the main part of this judgment at. I mean, everybody's going to pay the price towards the end. But, if you're part of the church, you're going to get sucked out of the mix, and you ain't going to have to go through all this ordeal, okay? So, but to everybody else, they're going to go through it, okay? And so this is where he's starting to warn these people. Let's look at verse number 2. For the indignation of the Lord is against all nations, and his fury against all their armies. He has utterly destroyed them. He has given them over to the slaughter. Let me ask you something. In the whole Bible, have you ever seen a word that said, for the indignation of the Lord? You ever heard that before? Because they don't talk about it. So you know what that means? God is angry. He's had enough. He's reached the limit on this deal. He's warned you enough. Now you're going to pay the price, okay? So that's what it's telling us here. These words depict this judgment. I mean, look, there's words in here, and in other translations, there's indignation, there's fury, utterly destroyed, and delivered to slaughter that's in here. That really doesn't even sound like God, except for the part where the prophets say and where God says there will be a judgment. There will be a price to pay. Well, this is the price. It's coming, okay? It's going to be time for this after all this stuff going on, okay? So how much stronger words, how much more descriptive words can they use to describe this universal judgment and the severity of this judgment? It's just like God's finally telling them, look, y'all, I ain't playing games with you no more. I've had enough. I've gave you chance on top of chance on top of chance on top of chance. I'm done. My dad, wasn't there that patient. When you were acting up, my dad said, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, come here, God gave him a whole lot more chances than my dad would have, and, so he's just, he's had enough. The Lord describes it as suffering. It's an unparalleled suffering by the history of the world, If you remember in the book of Revelations, we talked about seals and vials and trumpets that were going to bring the end and, and bring the judgments. And these things intensified and, and they're continuing to intensify with this message from Isaiah. And it's confirming that all this stuff is going to take place, We all want to see this, we talk about heaven. And from our earthly view, we want to talk about heaven because all this heaven's going to be is it's just going to be warm and fuzzy and happy, And heaven is going to be that way. But they're going to be before heaven. There are going to be some very not so glorious times, when the wrath of God, and the Bible speaks about the wrath of God. We think the wrath of God being some little mild punishment, some little mild hand slap we get while we're here on earth. But no, there's a wrath. There's not just a wrath. I think maybe you could call it in, what was that show? Anyway, it's not just a wrath, it's a reckoning. He's going to straighten it all out. There's a reckoning coming, okay? And everything, everything is going to be judged, okay? Verse number 3. Also their slain shall be thrown out. Their stench shall rise from their corpses, and the mountains shall be melted with their blood. Now, ain't nothing attractive sounding in that deal, is it? Nothing. Now, that's just nasty, you know. And you just think, and you look at that, and you think about it, and you think about the people. Their slain, who are there? That's people. Their slain shall be thrown out. Their stench shall rise. There, who is there? Their slain shall be thrown out. That's these nations that have turned against God. That's who's going to pay the price for all this stuff. But you know, Jesus told them in the book of the Revelation, he tells of all these things coming. He tells that the judgment's coming, you know, but nobody wants to listen, you know. I don't ever, if you've ever seen, and I'm sure we all have, on TV we've seen them, but if you've ever had to go to one or you've been in one or had to drive through one, a natural disaster after the destruction that's left behind, you know, and it looks so horrible and so bad and so devastating. I remember being a kid living down there on the Gulf Coast, and them hurricanes had come through, and you know, you'd go down to Galveston, and man, there'd be sections of those nice beach houses on stilts and stuff down there, really nice homes, and you'd drive down there and there'd be nothing but beach. These houses, they were just gone, G-O-N-E, and there was just some sticks and some rubble sticking up down there. You know, and then we see where these hurricanes and tornadoes go through all of these countries up in the West and the Midwest and the Central Plains, and all the devastation just even recently that's been caused by all these storms. Even in North Texas, you know, we see all of this devastation. But, you know, Lord, what I'm telling y'all is everything that we've seen, as baddest as you can remember seeing, is just going to be mild compared to the desolation and the desolation and the destruction that the Lord's going to bring on people, you know, when he brings this wrath and brings this judgment through here, okay? Now, there's a lot of people that, you know, they're not really wanting to believe this, and they're not buying into it, because when they talk about God, they see God as old gentle grandpa sitting over there in the rocking chair, spittling and whittling all the time, you know. But, you know, that's just part of his character, that gentle God. That's part of his character. There's a wrath of God that we ain't never seen, but he guarantees us through his word that it's there and it will come. We don't get better. Just like he warned these people. How many times has he warned these people? You know, that's like the Assyrians. You know, right now, during this time when this is going on, the Assyrians don't even exist anymore. They're already gone, you know, during this time. So, you know, it just doesn't matter if you really believe this or you don't. It's coming. It's like salvation. You either believe in getting salvation and getting saved, or you don't believe in it, but you're the one that's going to be able to tell the truth of it in the long run, you know, because it's coming, you know. It's going to be that choice. It's going to be heaven and hell, okay? And so, you know, he's telling them again, it ain't far off. It ain't far off. You need to get ready. Verse number 4. All the hosts of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled up like a scroll. And their hosts shall fall down as the leaf falls from the vine, and as the fruit fallen from a fig tree. You know, what it's telling us there, you know, is that it's going to be dissolved. In other words, it's not going to do them any good anymore. Those things of heaven will no longer be good for them. You know, it'll be like the heavens are just rolled up like a scroll. It's just going to be rolled up and put on a shelf, because it's not going to pay any attention, and it's not going to do anything for those people anymore, because those people are going to be like a leaf that fell off the vine and fruit that fell off a tree. When a leaf falls off the vine and fruit falls off the tree, you cannot put it back on there. It's done. Finality. It's over with, okay? And that's what he's telling them, you know. The only thing you can do is make sure that you have a shelter made for yourself. And the only shelter to make is to be built in the Lord Jesus Christ, in God. That's the only place there's a shelter for these people. And really, while they're telling them this, it's not too late for them right now. But it's finna happen, you know. It's not, you know, like the old saying is about salvation. It ain't too late until it is too late, you know. So, you know, that's the whole thing, you know. Verse number 5. For my sword shall be bathed in heaven. Indeed, it shall come down on Edom and on the people of my curse for my judgment, for judgment. My sword shall be bathed in heaven. What does that mean? Basically, that means his sword is going to be sterilized and purified in his righteousness. And it'll come down and it'll be slashing with the righteousness of God. You know, and it talks about, there's a word, here it says Edom. In one of the translations, it calls Edom Idumea, I-D-U-M-E-A, Idumea. And that's just a place, and Edom is reflecting the people. It's reflecting to the flesh. And so that's what it's talking, that the flesh has rebelled against God, so God's fixing to rebel against them. He's fixing to do the judgment on them. All right, and so this is what it's telling, that indeed it shall come down, you know, on the people of my curse for judgment. All right. Now, verse 6 and 7, we can read that. And it's just more of this curse that's continued on. It said, the sword of the Lord is filled with blood. It is made overflowing with fatness. See, this is that sword again. With the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys of rams, for the Lord has sacrificed in Boraz, and a great slaughter in the land of Edom. The wild oxen shall come down with them, and the young bulls with the mighty bulls, and their land shall be soaked with blood, and their dust saturated with fatness. See, from what I'm understanding about this is when the Lord comes down, that these people, everything about these people and everything there, I mean, it sounds horrible, but what it's talking about is when the Lord comes and does this judgment, every man, woman, and child, horse, cow, chicken, pig, or whatever is going to pay the price, just like they did, just like what was it Saul did when it was Saul of Tarsus. Saul of Tarsus went into a town, and when he persecuted Christians, nothing breathed when he left there, nothing. And that's the way God's going to come down with this judgment. That's the way the wrath of God is going to be when he comes. And so that's what verses 6 and 7 are telling us there. Now verse 8. For it is the day of the Lord's vengeance, the year of recompense for the cause of Zion. You know, the Lord's vengeance, it can't be stopped. God's going to make these things right again. You know, evilness and rebellious man, you know, they must be put down. And so that's what God's going to do with them there. He's going to put them down. You know, it will be either God or hell. And, you know, that's the decision. That's still the decision that we have to make today. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're reading so much about Isaiah, is because we're still so dadgum similar to these people. We mess up and get up. 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 You know what I think he's trying to tell us? You guys need to make a choice, y'all. Y'all going to have to, you need to try a little harder, you know, or something. Look at Matthew 5 and 18. Let's see what it says about that. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till it is all fulfilled. So what God's telling us is that we need to obey the law. We need to obey him because he's going to obey his own law. The things that he said, he's going to bring it all to fruition. He's going to bring it with one jot or one tittle. The wrath of God's going to be the wrath of God when he comes. So you got to decide. You want to live by jot and tittle, or you want to be punished by jot and tittle, is what this is telling us here, okay? If you don't know what jot and tittle is, it's a little bit. He's going to take it down to the last little bitty part. He's going to fulfill it all. There won't be no left over when he's done. It'll be finished, okay? Now, we're going to read verses 9 through 15. And 9 through 15, as we read it, you'll see it's just a continued judgment through here. So let's scroll through those, please, ma'am. Its streams shall be turned into pitch, and its dust into brimstone. Its land shall become a burning pitch. It shall not be quenched night or day. Its smoke shall ascend forever. From generation to generation it shall lie waste. No one shall pass through it forever and ever. But the pelican and the porcupine shall possess it. Also the owl and the raven shall dwell. Now let me stop right here and let me tell you, what is that? What does the pelican and the porcupine have to do about this, and the owl and the raven? This is just talking about all of these desolate desert animals that they have. And some of these names are English translations for the words in the Greek that were in there that don't necessarily mean. I mean, if you look these up, you'll find several things in here. And, and so what it's talking about is the animals like the jackals and hyenas and stuff like that. Only the scavengers are going to be left through that still. And they're to be the ones that's going to own it, And it says that he shall stretch out over it the line of confusion and the stones of emptiness. They shall call its nobles to the kingdom, but no one shall be there, and its princes shall be nothing. And thorns shall come up in its palaces, nettles and brambles in its fortresses. It shall be, again, habitation of jackals and a courtyard of ostriches. Well, what did the ostriches do? What is we known to do? Well, the only thing you know about them is all they did was just run around in circles and stick their head in the sand. So they're not going to do anybody any good either, okay? The wild beasts of the desert shall also meet with the jackals, and the wild goat shall bleat to its companion, and also the night creature shall rest there and find herself a place of rest. There the arrow snake shall make her nest and lay eggs. The arrow snake, that's just a little desert snake that's really, really, real quick. When it sneaks up on something, it like snakes does, it strikes, real fast. But it is a desert-dwelling animal, and so that's why it's laying eggs and making nests and hatch and gather them under her shadow, because they're just going to spread and make the desert a more undesirable place to be. There also shall the hawks be gathered. When it talks about the hawks, it's not talking about hawks as much as what we're thinking about. What it's talking about is it's talking more about, about buzzards and vultures and stuff like that that grow one. And everyone with her mate. So these animals, they're desert animals. They're the scavenging animals. They're the leftover animals. So they're probably going to prosper a little bit when all the people are gone. But Lord knows from what we're reading, there's going to be lots of carrion for them to dine on for quite a while, okay? So they're going to be there with all of that. And then we're going to read verses 16 and 17. And all verses 16 and 17 are the finalization, right, kind of the finalization of this judgment here. So 16 and 17. Search from the book of the Lord and read. Not one of these shall fail, not one shall lack her mate, for my mouth has commanded it, and his spirit has gathered them. He has cast the lot for them, and his hands have divided it among them with the measuring line. They shall possess it forever, from generation to generation. They shall dwell in it. So what 16 and 17 are telling us for when this wrath of the Lord comes, it's going to come just like the scriptures before it said. It's going to come with every jot and every tittle of wrath that's come. It's going to come through there, and that wrath is going to be educated like it was set in there with the slide rule. It's going to be the perfect judgment for these people, and it's not going to leave out anyone. It's not going to leave out anything. It is going to be the finalization of the wrath and the finalization of the judgment of God. It's not going to miss anything. In other words, there's not going to be another chapter where these people get another chance. That's going to be over with when this judgment finally comes and gets here. So that's pretty much what this chapter is talking to us about here. Is that finalization and that judgment. It really, really sounds to me like I would not want any part of it. When bodies are laying everywhere in these mountains, these high places where these people build back during the day, and they're going to be lined with bodies and flowing with blood, it doesn't sound like anything I'd like to be a part of. So that's what we got for this evening. So, hey, you guys that are tuned in with us, if you're online with us, thanks for being here and watching with us. Y'all come and be part of our dinner when we feed. We feed at 6 o'clock every night on Wednesdays, Then we have this little Bible study. And next week we're going to finish up in Isaiah for a little while. Then we're going to start in the book of Matthew. We're going to do a study on the book of Matthew and take a break from the book of Isaiah for a little while. And we'd love you to have you come be a part of it. Come join with us. And thanks for being part